Welcome to Writer's Den. I'm Brenda Joyce Patterson. Writer's Den is a program that uncovers and showcases all things literary in Polk County and beyond. And today we have former Lakelander and former Poet Laureate of Delaware, JoAnn Balingit, with us. Thanks, JoAnn, for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Brenda. It's really special to be here.
Oh,
In
no
Lakeland.
problem. Yes, Lakeland. Having this, it made me think about the first time that I met you, which of course was in Lakeland, in the library that I work in Lakeland Public Library. And getting to know you over these years has been quite interesting. The idea that a poet laureate, I mean, who even ever meets a poet laureate? But to think that a poet laureate for a state came from Lakeland is pretty amazing. Can you tell me how that even happened? How did you become Poet Laureate of Delaware?
Well, in all the different constituencies that have a poet laureate, from city to county, even some libraries, states, and of course the U.S. Library of Congress sponsors the Poet Laureate of the United States. They all have different systems for deciding how to choose a poet laureate and what their responsibilities will be. And in Delaware, the state poet laureate is to promote poetry in any way that they feel will get the word out about just enjoying the art of poetry. And when I was chosen to be appointed to the position in 2008, the year before they put out a call from the Delaware Division of the Arts for people who were interested in serving in the position to send in a manuscript of poems and an essay about why you wanted to serve in the position and an application. And those applications and poem packets were sent out to a panel outside of the state. Pretty much the same way they do art fellowships. There was an application process.
Okay. I wondered about that. I know here in the state of Florida, for many, many years, it was a poet by the name of Ed Monsky or something like that. And he had been appointed. That was
Skellings?
Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe it was Skellings.
I'm trying to remember.
You're right. It is Ed Skellings. And he was poet laureate for, it felt like decades. And then I don't know if he died or he stepped down, but it was vacant for a little while. And then Peter Meinke, who is a poet that I know, that I was fortunate enough to have some classes with, he was chosen to be the poet laureate. I don't think that he's a poet laureate now for Florida, but yes, you're right. The process seems to be interesting, and some elements of that process vary, I guess, fairly widely from state to state. And certainly if it's a poet laureate for a city or for a county or something like that, then the process is different, even more so. So yeah, that's really cool.
The poets laureate that I follow, that I know of anyway, and who I met from other states mostly when I was poet laureate from 2008 to 2015, they do have one thing in common, whether they get appointed, and for the most part, there are usually panels of people deciding. But the thing they have in common is that they're really interested in community service.
Yes.
And I think that's a thread that goes through pretty reliably. And the Academy of American Poets just started a program a year ago. It's now in its second year to fund poets laureate from any community, whether it's city or state, to do community projects. So that's really exciting.
So interesting. And so who was that? Was that which group was it that was offering the funding for the Poets Laureate? You just mentioned it. I'm sorry.
There's a press release that's fairly recent at
Hmm.
poets.org, the
Ah,
Academy of American Poets.
right.
This year, I think there are 23 Poets Laureate who applied and got $50,000 grants to do community service projects.
That is so cool. That's
It's
so
so
cool.
great. Yeah.
And of course that's the major element of a poet laureate is to um, be part part of the community and in some ways the face of the community, correct?
And in terms of poetry,
Yes.
you know, getting the public to appreciate the art of poetry, getting the word out about poetry, supporting the poets
Right.
that are in your area, whether they're seasoned in publishing or whether they're aspiring to write.
Right.
So I did a lot of teaching, but I also did a lot of support for professional writers, you know, trying to
Hmm.
get opportunities for the writers in my state to get together,
Oh, okay,
to
gatherings and
to
stuff.
to gather with each other, to get to know each other,
Right.
to bring in poets from out of state to do readings and retreats and classes.
That sounds so cool. But weren't you, wasn't that an element of your work as a poet before you became poet laureate?
Yeah, yeah, I was involved in all that. It
Right.
became a little more intense after I became poet laureate, and then I was doing usually in the spring I would do weekly columns for the newspaper, introduce poets. The whole effort was to just get people to read
Right.
poem
Right. Of
and
course.
and to appreciate
Right. To
what what you can what you can learn about yourself
right.
when you
Oh,
really identify with the poem and love the work of another poet. It's a conversation. It
yeah.
helps you realize that there are a lot of things that we have in common across the centuries, across geographies, across cultures. And then it's just so wonderful, if you love language, to get immersed in the best words there are for expressing emotion. And that's one of the reasons that I was really involved in wanting to get programs going where students could get some recognition for their writing and where they could
Right.
appreciate poetry, because that is the language. Poetic language is the language we have for expressing how we feel,
True.
what we're experiencing. And
Oh, and what we're experiencing.
and and you know, if young people can get a hold of that facility with language to express what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, that's such a powerful tool to be able to communicate what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. So
Right.
it's so important to have creative writing in the schools, I believe.
Yes. Um, of course, right now, I'm going to sort of go off topic, but come back to topic. So, right now in the world, we have so much. The elephant in the room is, of course, COVID-19, and here that's global, obviously. And here in the United States, what we have right now is more racial unrest to sort of underlie all of the COVID-19 stuff. And I was thinking that with being a poet laureate, poets laureate are supposed to sort of illustrate how writing fits into your everyday life. Um, how, like you say, it helps to have that language to be able to express yourself. And I was thinking about what you were saying on one of our other conversations, where you were talking about that you're part of all these different groups. We're meeting on Zoom. Look, we're on Zoom now. Um, uh, this is Writer's Den first ever Zoom interview, and that you've been meeting with these groups and you've been writing as a group and singly about living during this time, during this viral time. Did you have anything you wanted to say about it? Because didn't you say you had a publication out talking about this lovely pandemic?
I have a really short flash nonfiction piece
Mm-hmm.
up at mcsweeney's.net in a column called A Force Outside Myself.
Right.
Citizens over 60 speak. And it was written really quickly one afternoon after I came back from the grocery store early on in March, when
Right.
we were just beginning in Delaware to realize that the lockdown was coming, and
Yes.
that the exposure to the virus was sweeping across the country. So grocery store shopping became really scary. I felt
Yeah.
myself getting nervous, like getting ready to go in. I was wearing a mask for the first time. I wrote a response to how it felt to go into the grocery store and feel like everyone was a danger. It was awful.
Yeah.
I had already experienced something like that the week before, the first time I went on a very long walk in the state park through the woods trails near my house.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been told already to distance, but we hadn't begun to wear masks yet. Things
Right.
sort of escalated, over the second half of March.
Right.
And I wrote on social media, I say hi to everyone that I pass because it makes me feel more comfortable.
Right.
But staying 6 feet apart feels so strange.
It does.
And little did I know now, 75 days later, that I would be in my house
Right.
for the week. I'd be going out maybe once a week.
Yes.
I had never ordered groceries online before. I did that twice,
Right.
and then I decided I didn't really like that way of shopping. But I was very, very grateful for the people that brought the groceries to my door those 2 times, and the risks they take.
Yes, I too had a somewhat similar experience because I'd had a chance after much saving to go to Paris, and I went to Paris the second week of March. But my week-long, supposed to be week-long sojourn into Paris wound up being 3.5 days because things tightened. Up, tighten down, batten down, if you will, about the borders and trying to stop the spread of disease back and forth. And I too got back, and I was in quarantine because I had returned from a country that the CDC had deemed to be, I think it was a tier 3 country, which was if you had been in that country, you need to self quarantine for 2 weeks to make sure you weren't the danger to your community. And so I ordered groceries, but it was an odd experience. I tried to make sure that I was very generous with the people who did still have to go out. Not everybody was fortunate enough to have a job like how I have, where I could be in. And it just made me think
Mhm.
about how separate this whole process is making us even more so. And yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest lessons, is how we need to be taking care of each other,
right.
and how taking care of each other requires an effort and a reaching out.
Yeah.
It requires us to go out and say, what do you need?
Yes.
Here's what I can give. And I think people are realizing that it's not enough just to have good intentions.
Right. We have to be more deliberate now. Um, we have to be, because of the virus, but also because when we're not as deliberate, we see our human connection to our friends and family and to just your neighbors start to spread out and disperse. And yeah, yeah. You talk.
Yeah,
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
one of those people who's guilty of not knowing my neighbors very well.
Uh, I'm a little bit like that too. Thank God my husband, who is generally not a talker, has made connections with everyone around us. That's a good thing. He's in the yard more, so I guess that's it. Um, Speaking of sort of making these connections and what have you, um, well, I'm thinking of two avenues. Let's see, we'll go down this one avenue for a moment. Um, you talk about, we've talked before, and you were saying about the different groups that you're in, especially now since this this sort of narrowing of our social sphere has happened. What groups are you in? Can you mention a couple of them? Are they open to anybody, or do you have to be a poet laureate to be a part of it?
No, no. You can find so many writing groups online right now,
Mm,
catering to so many different constituencies.
right.
Um, a good way to follow them is if you are on the Twitterverse. There's a lot of writer, right? There's writer Twitter,
Yes.
which is publishing, depending on who you follow,
Right.
is publishing get-togethers and gatherings and readings. You can go to literary websites like Electric Literature or LitHub and find people launching their books.
Right.
Um, and with wanting to write and having a group of writers to support you, um, I have different groups. One of my writing groups, we named ourselves the Decades because our ages have us going across 4 decades.
Oh, nice.
Um, and I'm the oldest. I'm in the
What a
60s
blessing.
decade. We are writers and artists that we meet in Philadelphia, and we met originally through being alumni of Voices of Our Nation Arts, or VONA, which
Right.
is a writing organization for writers of color. And we were all in the Philadelphia area, so we began to meet regularly and called ourselves VONA Philadelphia. And
Mhm.
then we decided that we would be the Decades. And this multi-generational group,
Mhm.
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We felt
Right.
like we had a lot to learn from each other as far as having come of age in different time periods. I'm the boomer, right?
Yeah.
So so that's one of my groups, and we can't get together right now, but we have Zoomed a couple times.
Good.
We share work. The writing groups that I'm doing most faithfully right now is a memoir writers group that I've been Zooming with for 2 years. That's led very generously by the memoir writer Tammy Delatour,
Okay.
and we get together in the afternoons during the week. When I can, I join up. She's there every day. There's another writing group that holds space for the women writers who are alumna of the writing retreat Hedgebrook.
Yes.
And I log in there every day, and that's a nice space because we check in, we ask how each other is doing,
Yeah.
we make an intention to work on what we're going to work on, and then we log off and log back in 90 minutes and say, okay, here's what I did.
Nice.
Sometimes people get logged back on and say, I took a nap. I'm so
Well, that's
scattered. Sometimes people log back in and say, I got an acceptance in the email. So it's good to have a group of friends, and they don't have to be writers. They can be anyone that wants to get together and just check in and say, how are you doing? Do you have an intention today? Maybe I will actually sit down and meditate. Right. Maybe I'll clean the bathroom. Whatever it is, because it's so hard to function right now.
It is.
Without our routines.
Without each other.
Too. It's a good thing too to break the routine and ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need?
Right.
To take care of myself and be a creative person.
Right. I think we've been going for a little bit, and I'm hoping that I timed it right for you to do a little bit of reading. But before you do the reading, you and I have talked off and on over the years, and you've mentioned that that you have been working on this memoir about your life, and as an extension, your family's life. And I guess I would like for you to talk somewhat briefly, or maybe I tell you what, could you read your poem? Could you read that poem that sort of addresses some of the things that you address in your memoir?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this one is called History Textbook America, or?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so proud of myself. I remember. So, and we'll be posting your poem in this program, so that people will be able to see it and sort of follow along while you read. So I'll get out of the way.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. History Textbook America. I'd search for Philippines in history class. The index named one page, moved on to Pierce. The making of America marched past my enigmatic father's place of birth. The week he died, some man we didn't know called up. This is his brother. One more shock. Phoning for him. He died 3 days ago. The leaden black receiver did not talk. My uncle never gave his name or town. We never heard from him. Was it a dream? The earpiece roar dissolved to crackling sounds. A dial tone erased the Philippines. And yet, my world grows huge with maps crisscrossed. My history alive with all I've lost.
Connection. Missed connection.
Missed connections. But this is it's a poem about identity and wanting to know who you are and grieving a lost cultural connection. But it's also about all the possibilities that open up when you have before you everything to learn. So history came alive for me in a really vital way when I began to research my father's possible life as a Filipino young man and then as an immigrant to the United States. So I don't know anything about his life in the Philippines because he withheld that from us, from all us kids. My mother and father had 12 kids together, and I'm the third oldest.
Wow.
So yeah, big family.
Yeah.
so a whole different way of looking at history opened up for me when I began to research the Philippine-American War of 1899 to 1902, which was not in any textbook when
No.
I was in high school, and still is covered in a sanitized way,
Mm-hmm.
because it is not an American war that U.S. historians initially, or even now, are proud of. It was a war of imperialism. So, it's also wanting to delve into history is also about wanting to know more about who you are.
Yes.
And
Very
that's how we first met, when I was in the Lakeland Public Library
yes.
looking for newspaper articles.
Right. And we at the desk, at the reference desk, helped you out, got you, I think, you had your brother with you, I think, um,
Mm-hmm.
and got you all set up with looking at newspaper on microfilm and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, in our archives and what have you. So, yeah, history is not going away, people. It's not going
Well,
away.
no, history sounds so, when you say history, it sounds so detached. I mean, lives,
Right.
what people are learning right now with what's going on with these protests against police violence, against the militarization of police forces, and the murder of unarmed victims.
Yeah.
That's those protests are making history about a history that has not been attended to.
Yes. Yes, very much so. Um, it's sort of like, and I hate to say we're getting close to the end of our time talking, because maybe I'll talk them into letting you come back and we'll talk some more. But this history thing, this history problem, it's like when you have a wound, like maybe you scraped yourself on a piece of wood and you kind of put a bandage over it and think it's okay. But you didn't realize that you left a piece of wood in that wound, and your body keeps saying, pay attention to me, pay attention to me, because it won't go away. That wound won't heal unless you remove the piece of debris, actually attend to it, like you said. It won't go away, not until it's attended to. So, right.
Yeah.
I know.
Those splinters that won't go away are all the questions I have about my mother and father that they kept secret. That's why
Yes,
I'm writing about my family.
yes. I think I'm going to do something unprecedented. I think I am going to have you come back on to the show, because I know that we've gotten to the end of this one. And my producers are probably going, Brenda, you're so long-winded. But I find our topics very fascinating, and so I want to talk more. We will talk about your memoir on the next time that we have you on, and I will work out those arrangements, because you have a definite story. I know a piece of it, and I would like to give you a chance to tell more about it. So at this point, I'm going to have to say thank you so much for coming on the show. And it is always a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, JoAnn.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank
Yeah,
you for having me.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
It's
And
really an honor to be here.
oh, good. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
and especially with your connection to the Lakeland Public Library. That's a very special place to me.
Ah, oh, good. So when we talk next, we'll talk about that for sure, and we'll talk about your family's history. Um, but everyone out there who have joined us for this inaugural Zoom Writers Den interview, thank you so much for attending. to the Writers' Den.